everyone. If you happen to be here, please say hello. And in the chat, let me know where you're located. I've got my iPad here. I just thought I would just do this impromptu live Zoom, live live YouTube. I haven't done this in a while. I'm really rusty. So I apologize, but if any of you happen to be there, I'd love to hear from you. And I'm testing out some new equipment. And so hello there from Sweden. Awesome, you guys. Lynn and Janet and Laura. Wow, that's awesome. It's really great to see you. There's a lag between when you guys say hello and then my being able to see you on the chat. So I wanted to say hello. It's been a while and just wanted to let you know I'm still alive. Hope that you guys are all doing well. And it's been a crazy year, as you all know. And even doing a live video, it's been kind of far from my mind because of X, Y, and Z that has needed to be done. And I'm sure you all feel that way. It's a time where we all feel really discombobulated, and it's been a very interesting year, to say the least. So anyways, I did manage to get into my studio. I've been painting a lot, though. And this is one that I have documented the entire thing. I think I'm going to call it Hanging by Thread. And what I wanted to really talk about, in addition to answering any questions that you might have after I talk about this painting, is that I know one of the big questions that artists have is all about content. And the other question is about, well, you know, especially the way I work, you see that I put a ton of paint on there, and then in the end, I cover up so much of it. So the question is, well, why did you do that? I mean, paint is expensive. So why do you put it on there if you're only going to cover it up? So content and covering up paint, those two things I kind of want to address in this YouTube live. And I also want to tell you that if you did not get a notification that I just went live, there's a reason for it. It means you're not subscribed to my channel. And I'm hoping to do more live videos because I've got new equipment that I've been experimenting with. And I feel like I want to stay connected to all of you. I mean, it's been so hard with this pandemic because we can't see people. So the way to subscribe to my channel and get a notification when I go live, and it's the only way to get a notification, is to subscribe to my channel. So you hit subscribe, and then when you do that, you see a little notification bell. And if you click that bell, that means that YouTube will notify you. I won't, they will. And then you won't miss a live, because I don't know how long I'll be doing this, you know, this particular session, but I want to answer questions. I definitely want to just be of any help and encouragement and inspiration to anybody who wants to tune in. So the only way to do that is if you're subscribed. Otherwise, because I will just be very impromptu with this. I don't always plan these lives. I just want to, like, when I want to go, I want to go. I don't always say, hey, in 2 weeks, join me live. It's not, my life doesn't work that way. Everything is pretty much spur of the moment. I like to just go live when I feel like it. So anyways, two things then. And by the way, this entire painting, which is now done, and it's got borders because it's canvas, it's going to be stretched later, but it is not stretched now. So therefore the borders look messy, and I'll explain why they're messy. But the first question that I get a lot of is, well, you know, you started with so much paint. Why did you cover up so much of it? And this entire painting is documented. It's going to be in my Watch, Learn, Grow library, but it's not there yet because how many hours of video? 5, 6, 7, 8, I don't know. It's a lot. And it's way too long for YouTube. So it's going to go in my library. So if you haven't checked that out, there's a link in my description where you can, you know, tune into that. I've got over 80 hours of video in there. So if you're like, I'm tired of Netflix, I'm tired of Amazon Prime, I want something to watch. If you want to watch tons of my painting, that's what's in the library, and a lot of other things too. So that's where this content's going to be. Like this painting is done. All the documentation is coming to the library. So I kept a limited palette. I mean, this is kind of what you see here is essentially what's on my table. I had red, I had yellow orange, black and white. So I kept the palette fairly simple. A lot of people that I work with in the masterclass, and I've been sort of letting people know that I've been binging on Project Runway. I have to admit, I used to do a lot of sewing. My mother was a pattern maker. And at the end of the day, I'm so tired. Like I just want to tune into something and be a zombie, you know? But what I found with Project Runway, and for those of you who are not familiar with it, there are many seasons. I could tell you all the ones I've been watching. What I love about it though is that it's fashion, and it's under pressure. Like, you know, there are these limitations where designers have to work under time constraints, money constraints, materials constraints, but they're competing for these prizes. But what happens is they have critics, you know, judges who judge the work. And what I love to listen to is that critique. You know, I do critiques in my master class, and I've been learning some new critique skills. So, and also I learn about, like, I apply what I see in the world of fashion to my own work. So fashion is a form of art. And I found this little niche of a program where I just want to share that with you. If you want to binge on Project Runway, it's pretty awesome. Anyways, so with all that, the reason I'm telling you this is because I've been watching so many seasons, and we have a granddaughter now, and it's been like, okay, well, maybe I should start sewing again. I started to get replace the things I lost in the fire, like my sewing machine and my thread, and you know, one thing led to another. I need elastic, and I need bias tape, and it's, oh my gosh. Anyway, so with all that in my head, this underpainting has a lot of references to pattern making. So if you've never done any sewing, that you may not understand what I'm talking about, but I talk about how I kind of made some pattern pieces. Like this would be a sleeve that I cut out of Bristol paper, and that's like right here. So in the series of videos, you're gonna, you know, I'm gonna show you how it is that I came up with these shapes that are meaningful to me. So there is content in the painting, and there are many layers of like content that you're building and building and building. It's like historical. So the first question being, well, yes, there's a lot of paint underneath these white shapes, lots of like mark making, and I actually had some pattern pieces that I did with a thick black acrylic marker. This is actually acrylic marker. It's hard to see a lot of it now, but I had references, you know, to pattern pieces, and I made my own. So there's that content. And then I don't know, the color was it was kind of bright, but the color to me, it's more about value. So I was watching my value, and then of course it got very chaotic. And so when I started to cover up the underpainting with these big blocks of like more simple white and high key areas, I just wanted to say that the content is underneath. And then because I made my own kind of shapes, I bring some content into the final painting as well. So, you know, I couldn't get these little areas that I left open if I hadn't started with chaos. And I feel like chaos is sort of like reflective of my life. And then when I put these pieces on top, like these bigger shapes, it's kind of like, do you see how this has made the painting a lot more calm than some of my other work? That's a decision that I make each time I paint. You know, do I want to make this painting more energetic and leave it that way? Or do I want to like play with the energy, and then in the end, it's down? I don't always do the same thing, but I definitely want to be able to make a painting more calm if I want to. And this is one way that you can do it. And that's what I decided to do. And then I started to see letters forming. And so I started to incorporate the letters of members in my family. Again, there's content. It's not always literal. It's not easy to see. I know it's there. And as long as I know it's there, I'm satisfied. So there's that. And so anyways, I wanted to explain, these are all my pieces that I cut out for this painting. I mean, there's a ton of them. And the cool thing is that you can use them again and again. So I will be talking about that in the library. Those videos are coming, but they're not edited yet. So that was one question, is, you know, the thing about wasting paint. Like, you've covered up all this paint, and why did you do that? Paint is expensive. Again, it is there, and when I do the sanding like I did here, little bits of it are still there, and I wouldn't get these edges, which are very important to the painting. I couldn't get this if the red, this is red underneath here. I remember putting the red there. If I hadn't put that red there, I couldn't get these edges. So don't get the feeling like things are, once you cover them up, they're gone forever, because you can always reveal that again. And let's see. So yeah, and so I've addressed the two things, covering up paint and then the content. I just wanted to point out that even for like those of you who paint abstractly or not expressionist, abstract expressionist, and just not objective is what I was trying to say, which is what I am. I'm a non-objective painter, which means that I'm not trying to go for anything too literal, but you can still have hints of things that any degree of, okay, this is really literal, because you can read it like maybe it's the letter E. I have a letter E there, but maybe I turn it upside down and backwards, and then you can't really tell what it is. So there's a wide degree, a wide area where you can play with how literal you want to be. So this is under my table here. These were my tools. I had acrylic paints. I wasn't sure whether I was going to go into cold wax and oil. I'm not going to in this case, because this is another first for me, is working on canvas. And this was pre-gessoed, and I taped the portion all along here that's going to be stretched. If it goes stretched, it gets stretched, then I'm going to lose this. I needed to have an extra border. So you want to keep at least like probably 3.5 inches if you're going to stretch it later. So that was another first for me. And so now what I'm going to do is look at the chat and say hello to everybody. And hi to, gosh, there's so many of you here. Hi, Cindy, and hi, Laura. Hello from Brazil. And Ron and T-Scout, Judith, Marilyn. It's great to see all of you guys. I love seeing you here. And again, this is very impromptu. At this point, I just wanted to kind of tell you what I was working on. This is a painting that's 3 feet by 6 feet. And I'm going to be moving on into an oil and cold wax medium painting that is, I actually started a while ago. I actually did a YouTube live on it. It has a dark black gesso underpainting, and then I launched into RNF pigment sticks and oil and cold wax. And that one I believe was a challenge. And I started it, it's on my other wall, and I want to get back to it. And I'm going to document that process, and that documentation for the most part will go into my library. And then I'm also going to be doing some Zoom live classes, which again, have never done it before, but given where we're at right now in 2021, I've got Zoom classes that are scheduled for Calgary, but it doesn't matter where the location is, because when you're doing it by Zoom, you could be anywhere, except that the Calgary one is you have to be Canadian to be in that one. So if you're interested, maybe in the comment section say, hey, yeah, I'd like to be part of the Canadian group taking your Zoom class. That's going to be oil and cold wax. And then the other classes I'm going to do, there will be some in acrylic and some in oil and cold wax. You can just click on announcements, and you'll find that I did a poll there where you can actually say, yes, you're interested in being in my Zoom class, and then fill out a form, and I'll have your information and go from there. So at that point, does anyone have any questions? I'll stick around if any of you have questions. I know this is really impromptu, so I'm not really prepared to talk about much else. Just want to answer any questions that you might have. So chat is the way to ask me something if you have a question about this painting or anything else in my studio. It feels very chaotic in here right now, but I'm also working toward a group show in January at the Radius Gallery. So I'm working on getting a cohesive body of work together, and it's coming along. I'm working in encaustic, working in watercolor, and acrylic, and cold wax medium. So I'm kind of working a lot of different mediums for that show. And so let me see. Thank you. Okay, so Laura, you're asking, yeah, how to proceed. Are you asking about this painting or some other painting? Because this one's almost done. I pretty much feel like it's done. I'm not sure if you want to, okay, this one. Well, from here, I would have to, I know that it's 3 feet by 6 feet, and I've left a border here. So what I would have to do, there are one of two ways I could actually get this to the end stage, which would be stretching it. I could either stretch it over stretcher bars, or I could adhere it to a cradle panel that is exactly 3 feet by 6 feet. So I did measure this very carefully, had to make sure that everything was square, not wonky and like oblique, so that if my stretcher bar or my cradle panel is exactly 3 feet by 6 feet, then I staple these edges over, and then I'm going to have to finish these since I got drippy paint dripped behind the masking tape, which was masking these edges, and it kind of caught the edge. That's why it looks the way it does. It didn't stay pristine, but that's okay. So I would just paint over that. Hello to Lynn Buckingham in Australia. And okay, the color code dots is a B. I'm not quite sure if you mean these dots. Like what I did there was I also explain in my videos in my library how I do use digital media sometimes to mostly toward the end of a painting, like what are those, like I check balance. And one thing I did, if I can find it here it is. So I went into Photoshop. I sometimes use digital media to like this, in this case, I stapled to the wall. So for me to flip it around and see how well balanced it is, that would be nearly impossible. So I take a photo, I throw it into Photoshop, and then I can rotate it. I can go back. I can rotate it 90 degrees, another 90 degrees. I can flip it horizontally and vertically to keep checking that balance. And then this is a little print that I did of the Photoshop version. Made of, like, one thing that I did after I worked in Photoshop was I had like this, there's a lot of color here. I decided to knock it out with this shape because I felt like it was too much. And what I find happens, like in a painting like this, at first you feel kind of like badly because you're covering up so much of the painting. Like you have all that color and it's pretty and kind of nice, really spontaneous. But then you realize the more you cover up, the more you want to cover up. So that whole idea of less is more gets easier and easier. And yeah, sometimes you go too far and maybe you cover up too much. But for me, what happens is, like as I started to put these white shapes on here, I started to feel like, oh my gosh, there's so much red. And the more I covered it up, I felt like my sensitivity to the amount of red got stronger and stronger and stronger. Like the difference between way before I put these shapes on and then after is like, well, in the beginning, I thought it was maybe okay. But then after I covered it up, it was like, oh, whoa, it's like way too much color. So again, I feel like in the end stages of your painting, you want to improve on your sensitivity to everything that's happening. The amount of X, Y, and Z, the amount of texture, color, shape, size, direction, like what's going on and what do you really want to say. So what I really try to do with this painting is capitalize on content. There's actually so much content in here. You may not see it or understand it because you didn't live my life, but if you had lived my life, you would see the content. I guess that's what I'd like to say about this. And okay, Cindy says, we know about value differences and contrasts. Can you say more about warm and cool balance and maybe even happy, sad balance in a painting? Yeah, that's a great question. So I do think that any dichotomy, like warm and cool, happy, sad, joy and sorrow, highly textured, no texture, these are all things that there's so many decisions to make in a painting. So let's just address, there's emotion that she's talking about, the happy versus the sad, and then value differences and contrast. So um, with the value contrast, I like to be very clear. If I'm finished with the painting, I want to be very clear to those people looking at the painting, like what it was that piqued my interest. Like, I don't want them to be confused. I have any like wide degree of levels of how easy it is to navigate any one of my paintings, but what I like to talk about in my course and in my master classes, what are the key areas of things that you care most about? And for me, like when I started to see this thing happen, and this happened by accident, I wasn't planning to like make a letter, but it just appeared kind of out of nowhere. And when it did, okay, like in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, okay, well, that could be a letter, and that could lead to a whole painting on typography. But notice the high contrast that I have chosen to keep in this painting. I didn't have to put light next to what is a very kind of, it's a mid-tone. It's kind of bordering on dark mid-tone if you saw this in black and white. So the first contrast is value. That, value is very, very important. The only reason that you can kind of see this, and you can see this and this, this is due to contrast in value. You can also see it due to contrast in saturation. So these areas here are high saturation, and these areas are low saturation. So another contrast is between high saturation and low saturation. So we've got dark and light, value, and color has three attributes. It has its intensity, which has to do with saturation. So here's high saturation, here's low saturation. We have the name of the color itself, red, yellow, black. That's the hue. And then we have its value. So to do that right, let's see, hue, intensity, and value. How light or dark something is. So this is very, very light, and then this is very, very dark. And then if you look at texture, like this is really smooth, and then that contrasts with something that's really busy. That's another contrast. Another contrast is a diagonal. Okay, that sets up energy. I have a critique coming up on Wednesday with my masterclass, and boy, there are about 3 paintings that, one of the artists wanted a painting that was calm, and but there are a lot of diagonals in her painting. There's circles and a lot of diagonals. So if you're trying to evoke a sense of calm, then diagonals are not really the way to do it. Verticals and horizontals and repetition without variation, low contrast things. There are ways to evoke a sense of calm, and that's not just my point of view. This is by looking at art and masters and what did they do. So, Cindy, I don't know if that answers your question, but if you could see up close, I mean, these are solid areas. These are textured because I sanded them back. That's another contrast. And then as far as warm and cool, every 2 words, like, sorrow versus happiness, warm versus cool, textured versus not textured, light versus dark. You can go on and on and on. The list is endless and infinite. I just believe that in a painting that you kind of want one of those 2 things to win. So if you're trying to have a predominantly warm painting, which is what this is, a little bit of cool, can be good. But you can have a warm red, and then you can have a red that goes cool. It doesn't mean you have to have a blue. You can have, that's the other thing too. This is actually a cooler red. It's a very dark, cool red. So you just want to have one that wins. And then as far as emotion goes, I really think that we as artists, like the one thing that we have that's deeply personal is how we're feeling on any particular day. Things happen that are good, things happen that are not so good. And we want to be able to use that emotion in our art. And that does a couple of things. It's a using our art as a form of communication to let the world know how we're feeling, but it's also very personal to us. Like, no two people have the same emotion at the same time. So it's just really critical to tap into how you're feeling on a daily basis if you happen to be in your studio. So um, I think that the best way to be able to evoke any feeling in your art is to literally sit down with your sketchbook and just put down a word like joy, put down a word like sorrow, put down a word like celebration, happiness, whatever it might be. And then, just from a verbal standpoint, like write down all the things that come to your mind, colors, shapes, textures. Like, if you're going to a funeral, you might be thinking black. You might be thinking very quiet and calm and, like not a lot going on. But if you're going to a wedding, you're thinking different colors, what appeals to you. So those two paintings of the wedding and the funeral should probably look pretty different. But you can try and work it out right in front of your canvas or your panel. But again, that's what your sketchbook is for. That's your lab notebook. You start to collect your ideas in your lab notebook. And it's not like you have to open up the lab notebook to paint, because once you write it down and commit something to writing, I thoroughly believe that you are reinforcing that pathway in your brain so that when it comes time to paint, you have a memory. You've thought about it already. It's not like, okay, gosh, I want to express joy, but I don't know how to do it. Wait a minute, I did write it down. I remember I wrote down this and this and this. Or if you need to jog your memory, open up your sketchbook, and collect pictures from magazines or from whatever it is and glue them into your sketchbook so that you have a reminder of what joy and sorrow look like. Long answer to a great question. Okay, Wendy says, I'm Canadian and would love to be part of your Zoom class in Calgary. Okay, great. Yeah, in the chat, that's helpful because I believe I will have access to chat afterwards. And if not, then I will say to you, Wendy, please, in the comment section, that's different from the chat, in case I lose the chat, please just put it in the comment section. Hey, I'm interested in your Zoom class. I'm in Calgary. Or, if you're not a Canadian, then I have other Zoom classes and I can give you those links, okay? So do I like using neutrals? From Laura Esterfish. And yes, that is a great question about neutrals. I fluctuate, I fluctuate between what colors, and I want to believe that in my life, there's no color there may be a color that I don't understand yet because I haven't worked with it, but I'd like to believe that there's no color that I can't learn to love. And I can also learn to love the lack of color, which kind of gets you into that more neutral category. I've done some paintings, like even in my YouTube videos, when I did Ad Infinitum and what was the other one called? Ethereum. Those two paintings were kind of done 48 by 48 inches. They were side by side and they became so neutral. So you can kind of look those paintings up. They had a lot of chaos on the bottom, like every color on my table here in acrylic, and then they transitioned into oil and cold wax. So if you haven't seen those videos on YouTube, I think those show you how much I love neutrals. Actually, I have a great appreciation for them, because what I find, if I do a neutral painting, what that does for me is that it helps increase my sensitivity to how many different whites there are, how many different off-whites there are, how many different gray whites and green whites and blue whites. It's like when you walk into a paint store and you see all those luscious paint chips, you just want to go there. But you could spend an hour in just the white section and like the names. And you realize that when people say white or neutral, well, what do you mean? Because there's like a zillion colors that are white or neutral. So I have a great appreciation for what would be considered neutral. I have a great appreciation for color, but I also realize that if I want to like let people know how I feel about color, I need to also show you what color is not, or it's going to be like this circus, carnival. too much of anything. And it's true in every form of art, whether that's fashion, painting, photography. Yeah. So that was a great question. What else is there here? Any more questions? Um, hello to Raquel in Costa Rica, Liz in Berlin, awesome. Netherlands, Jeanette, Judith. How do you demonstrate on Zoom Live? Okay, great question. In fact, I did a Zoom. I tested out an answer to your question. Essentially, a Zoom Live class would be just like this, and I can show you how. I've got some new equipment here, so I'm going to try and show you how, even though my table is an absolute disaster, right? I can actually tilt my camera. I can also bring things in closer. So let's say that this iPad here is my palette, I can actually zoom in on that. And then, I can zoom out again. And I can actually convert what we're looking at. Like if I wanted to show you this painting here in black and white, I could actually do that. So that's one of the things that I've been working on, I guess, during the pandemic is how do I make, if I'm going to do a Zoom workshop, I want it to be as close to me being there as possible. Because I have some scheduled now for, Houston and Calgary, and then these other ones through the Facebook group. I want to try to make sure that they're the best experience possible. So what I hope to do is have them be kind of project based, like we're going to do this, we're going to work on 2 paintings, here's the parameters, we're going to do a complementary painting, we're going to do a black and white painting, or we're going to do this. And then for the intermediate group, what I hope to do is, I got kind of excited when I thought of this. I have collected so many challenges from all the live calls we've done in the Watch and Grow library, and also just from within my masterclass that I'd like to present a challenge and then have all of us work on it at the same time, whether that's large scale, small scale, working in a series, working with a limited palette. I've got so many ideas and things that I want to do. So I thought, well, if I'm going to do it, why don't you do it with me? And then, we can check in with each other and I can comment on paintings. I can, you guys can actually unmute yourselves on a Zoom call and actually ask me questions like during a break. So that's kind of the idea of a Zoom class. Okay. Is there anything else? Looking here. Is that a truth that you can mix any color with gray to get neutrals? Well, that depends, because if I take, say, a lot of a bright color like this, so let's say I've got a lot of this, but only if okay, let's say, got to use like some measurements here. I say 2 tablespoons of this and 1 drop of gray. Yes, I have essentially manipulated this color and it is a tiny, tiny bit grayer. But if I don't add enough of this to actually desaturate the red so it's noticeable, then I wouldn't call it a gray until visually I can see that it's not as saturated anymore. That's true of any one of these colors. I could take red, I could take green, I could take blue, I could take yellow. I mean, if you drop 1 drop in a swimming pool, you're not going to know what you did, right? But if you have enough, it's all about proportion too. You start to manipulate a color by adding more and more and more of another color. And it's at that point when you start to visually see that, oh my gosh, it's not yellow anymore. It's now like a yellow gray. But if you think about the color wheel, and this is our basic color wheel that I talk about a lot. Essentially, here's our neutral gray in the middle. And we all know that if we mix yellow and violet or blue and orange, we don't really get a gray. We get kind of a greenish gray. But the point is that this kind of tells you that it is by mixing that we desaturate any of these bright colors. By combining them, you're going toward a gray. So there's an explanation for why whether you're mixing a gray with a color or you're mixing colors that are far away from each other on a color wheel, that they tend to go toward a gray because that's what our color wheel shows us, and that is true. So that's another great question. Okay, what else do we have? Hi, Joanna King from Whitefish, Montana. That's awesome. Okay, I'm looking for other questions. Yeah, you guys, let's see. Do you ever wrap cradled board with canvas around the cradle, similar to fashion to stretching on stretcher bars? And that question's from Laura Viveros. I mean, that's kind of what I'm dealing with now, Laura. I'm not sure. My tendency would be to create a stretcher bar that's 3 feet by 6 feet and do the stretching. And the reason for that is if any of you have worked with a panel that's 3 feet by 6 feet, that's a cradled wooden panel, it's heavy. So one of my reasons for going over to canvas are a couple of reasons. Number one is when they're finished, they can be rolled and they don't have to be stretched right away. So I have a gallery now in California, and I'm thinking, okay, if I start to work on canvas, I can ship these unstretched, roll them up, I can ship them, and they can be stretched on the other end. If I do it myself, I'm probably going to use stretcher bars because it'll be more lightweight, and I'm not dealing with, just having to lift these heavy cradle panels. So you can get a similar look to it. You're not going to really notice too much difference visually. But I did take unstretched canvas and I stapled it to the wall because I like having a nice hard wall to work on. I don't want to feel that bounce of the canvas, with my brush, because sometimes I want to get a nice clean edge. And if my canvas is bouncing like this, no matter how hard you stretch it, I think that that would annoy me. Plus, I did get out my awl, which I don't know where it is anymore. I think I took it over to the encaustic area, but I mean, I was actually like, still, sorry, I'm really destructive. There's no way, even if it's on canvas, that I'm not going to like get out something sharp and start to like get a ruler and slice and dice. I didn't go all the way down through the canvas, but there are definitely some gouges in there. Okay. Let's see here. Any other questions, anybody? I'm looking up here. Yeah, I'm sure you guys have better things to do on a Sunday than watch me, but I want to really thank you for being here. And Laura has another question. Do you varnish your paintings or with spray fixative? Yeah, varnishing kind of depends on the medium, Laura. So if I'm working in cold wax and oil, my final varnish after the paint is completely dry is just a final thin layer of cold wax medium, let it dry, it's done. Whereas in this case, this is acrylic and it stayed acrylic. It did not move into cold wax and oil. I don't really think it needs a final varnish. I think a final varnish does have this cohesive, in addition to the practical thing where it's just a good thing to seal everything in. It's going to have it'll create some sense of harmony, even if it's colorless, I believe, because it's going to make the surface quality all the same. I'm still on the fence whether I would absolutely have to do that. There are some marks that are pencil. So from that standpoint, yeah, maybe a final varnish, but a final varnish for acrylic can be anything from polymer medium to, you can use like a self-leveling gel. You can get UV resistant varnishes. There are so many things you could do. And I just think that I'm not really sure how much protection you're going to get if you don't use a UV resistant coating on it. So I'm not sure if I will put anything on here. I'm pretty pleased with the way it is. Sometimes I want to get more of an encaustic finish, and then I have done like 4-step processes where I can actually get an encaustic finish. But then that's if the painting is acrylic and on panel, not necessarily on canvas. I really don't think I can do my 4-step process on canvas. So that's another great question. Okay, everybody. Well, I've been on here for a pretty long time. And it's great to have all of you here. Whoops. And I know that I have at some point there's like a Q&A form for my YouTube videos, but I've got like several different groups now that submit questions. So probably for my YouTube channel, if you pop a question into the comment section, hopefully I'll see it there. And I don't know, just subscribe so that when I go live, you can ask your question. And thank you all for being here. It was really fun. And I just wanted to try this out. So now that I have gone live, I feel like I can do it again. There's a lot of technology involved. I hope you could all hear me. And if you enjoyed it, then just thank you for saying hello. And I hope that you're going to stay well and be safe. Okay. Well, thanks, everybody. I guess I'll see you later. Bye now.